What's going on, everyone? So, this trade is kind of making its rounds right now, and I would do this in an absolute heartbeat if I was the San Antonio Spurs. So, Spurs receive Dejounte Murray and the 2024 number one pick from Atlanta. Atlanta receives Keldon Johnson and Blake Wesley, 2024 number four and number eight first round pick, and get their 2025 first round pick back. So, let's dive into this trade because, again, I think this is a no-brainer home run for the San Antonio Spurs. I also think this is actually a fair trade for both sides. So let's get into the Spurs side of things first, and then we'll touch on Atlanta. So talking about the Spurs need a playmaker. They need a point guard. They are linked to Dejounte Murray. Dejounte Murray is a real option for the San Antonio Spurs. I also think Dejounte Murray makes a ton of sense for the San Antonio Spurs. I think he's a guy that is familiar with the Spurs, familiar with Pop, right? He's still to this day has talked high praises about Pop. I know that there was, some words after he was traded, right? But he's kind of came around and basically said, hey, Pop was like a father figure to him at times. And, he's a guy that I think alongside Victor Wembanyama gives you that all-star level point guard. He was at his best with the Spurs. Again, he was an all-star, all defense, right? This was a guy that led a Spurs team that realistically probably didn't belong in the playoffs, and was very impressive. He's still young enough to where, if it takes a year, 2, 3, for San Antonio to kind of get back into the swing of things as far as like contention goes, he would still kind of fit in with that timeline. So I think in this scenario, you would get your all-star level point guard to pair with Victor Wembanyama. You also land the number one draft pick. And yes, it would, it'd suck to lose Keldon Johnson, but at some point, chances are they're probably going to have to trade Johnson or Vassell. Now, the San Antonio Spurs, supposedly, again, based on reports, have Victor Wembanyama and Vassell essentially untouchable, right? We'll see. Obviously, nobody is untouchable outside of maybe Victor. There's only like a handful of guys in the league, period, that are untouchable. But if the right move or the right trade was on the table, I'm sure that they would move Vassell. But it makes sense, right? Get Dejounte Murray. Now you got Vassell at the 2, got Victor Wembanyama. You're starting to see the shaping of the San Antonio Spurs roster. But the whole reason that the San Antonio Spurs would do this trade is to land the number one pick, right? Dejounte Murray is great, but the idea is to also land the number one pick and then draft Zaccharie Risacher, right? He's the guy from France. He is the 6'8", 6'9", 19-year-old that many believe will be the best player in this draft. Many people think he should go number one. Him and Alexander Sarr are kind of like the two guys that many believe are very likely the two best players in this draft. But, I mean, you're talking about a guy 6'9", can do basically anything, right? Can handle the basketball, shoot basketball, make plays, right? He's the forward. Now, if you can land him and Dejounte Murray, I think you do that 10 out of 10 times. Right? Because right now, based on kind of the rumors and just what's going on as far as the draft goes, the San Antonio Spurs are linked to basically Nikola Topic and then Stefan Castle are kind of like the two guys that are heavily linked to the San Antonio Spurs, right? Now, the big problem is Zaccharie is very unlikely to be there at 4, right? It's kind of like he's probably going 1 or 2. And even if he doesn't go 2, he probably goes 3. So do you run the risk if you're San Antonio of not making a move like this and running the risk of not getting Zaccharie? Now, maybe they're happy with, a Castle or Nikola or whomever, right? Maybe they do maybe even prefer one of those guys. But to me, it's like if you can land Zaccharie and Dejounte Murray, I think that that's a no-brainer, right? Because now, again, you basically have your starting five of now and the future locked up, right? You got Dejounte Murray, you got, Devin Vassell, right? You have Zaccharie Risacher, you have Victor Wembanyama, and then now you just basically need to get a center, right? You could go and get a veteran center if you wanted to. You could go and move or keep Victor at the 5 and go get a power forward. There's so much flexibility, and that's the beauty with Victor Wembanyama is his flexibility, right? He can play the 5, he can play the 4. So if you were to find a big man that maybe you like and you're like, okay, this is the guy, let's bring him in at the center position, right? Maybe you go and make a push for like a Karl Anthony Towns or something like that, right? To me, it's just, I think that this makes all the sense in the world for the San Antonio Spurs. But trades have to be fair. And again, I think this is a fair trade because mainly from the Atlanta side of things, I think the Atlanta Hawks probably still get their guy, right? Now, if let's say San Antonio goes and ends up picking up, Zaccharie, right? Then that means everyone else is very likely going to drop. Now, the only problem is like two things. One, if they are so enamored with a Alexander or a Zaccharie to where it's like, man, like we don't want to run the risk of losing them, then I could see them maybe rejecting the trade. But to me, it's like if you're Atlanta and you're not like super duper sold on either guy, and you're kind of looking at like, man, we could get Stephon Castle and maybe one of the big men, right? Maybe you get Clegan or Sarr, right? Maybe you still land one of them. It's very possible that happens, right? And now you basically get 2 picks in the top 10. You're kind of rebuilding and retooling around Trae. If you still want to trade Trae, you can if you wanted to, right? You could ship this out and do this package for Dejounte Murray and then still kind of field calls for Trae Young if you wanted to. Or you could keep Trae, and now you have a bunch of picks that you could kind of use to build around with Trae. I mean, Trae's talked heavily about how, he still wants to stay in Atlanta. He wants to win in Atlanta. He wants to win the chip. If you're Atlanta, you could kind of tell him, like, hey, give us a year or two. Or now you have the number 4 and number 8 pick, right? And you could use that to go and maybe make a move and go get a potential star or something. Maybe go get a Donovan Mitchell or something along those lines, right? Like it gives you flexibility if you're Atlanta. I still think you probably get one of the guys that you're interested in. I think you get a bunch of assets. You get to keep your 2025 pick now because you're probably not going to be great. I mean, you haven't been great with Dejounte Murray and Trae. You're probably not going to be much better without Dejounte Murray. So to me, I just think from an Atlanta standpoint, you get 2 picks in the top 10. You get your 2025 pick back. Still very likely end up getting the guy in the draft that you wanted to get in the draft. You could unload Trae if you still wanted to and just hit the full rebuild button. And now if you're a lottery team, you have your 2025 pick, right? And your 2026 pick. So you basically would have, your 2 years of lottery year picks. So you're in good shape in that regard. And then you also get a young talent that you can still kind of use to build around with, like, Johnson and say Sarr, and then whoever else you don't unload if you're Atlanta. I mean, if you're Atlanta, you can make the argument that you just basically trade the entire roster, right? Like, and I don't think that that's a terrible idea if you're Atlanta, right? Like, see what you can get for Bogdan, right? See what you can get for, a Clint Capella, right? I think that, maybe you keep like a Kobe Buffkin because, he's 20 years old. Maybe you keep an AJ Griffin is another guy that he's 20, 21, if I'm not mistaken. You keep like a Mohamed Gueye, right? again, young guy on that roster. And then you got to keep Jalen Johnson, I think, in my opinion, also. So to me, you basically are retooling and rebuilding around the two Johnsons, right? And you got a bunch of picks and you got a bunch of flexibility. And if you don't, like, let's say you're like, we don't want to hit the reset button. We want to kind of retool around Trae. Well, now you have the assets and picks to do that. Right? I just think, Keldon Johnson is a guy that you could keep or you could even reroute if you wanted to, right? Because Keldon Johnson, I mean, he's 24. So he's up there in the same age as Trae. He's a 15-5 guy, right? Rebounds wise, not assists. Assists, I think he's like around 3 assists. So, you're talking about a guy that, can help go get buckets, be another young piece. You go get your young center. You could keep Trae. You could trade Trae. You could whatever, right? I think that this just gives Atlanta options and flexibility, right? Now it puts you in a position to where you can consider tanking. You can consider kind of spending the next 2 years retooling, rebuilding. You can field offers for Trae without the risk or the fear. If you're San Antonio, you basically get everything you can want. You got like I said, you got 4 out of your starting 5 for now and the future, right? It's just, to me, I think this is a very big win-win. Now, personally, I think on the surface, the Spurs would win that trade in the beginning. To me, I mean, it depends on, what does Atlanta do and what's the overall return, right? Like, because again, if Atlanta misses on the draft and, they just make a wrong move or two or whatever, right? Like, there's always the possibility that something could go wrong. But I just think if you're Atlanta, I think you do this deal. And I think if you're the Spurs, to me, this is a no-brainer. You get what is very likely the best player in the draft. You get your all-star level point guard. To me, it's an easy no-brainer win-win. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like this move? Do you like this trade? Do you not like this trade? Do you think, you gotta, stay away from this? It's one team loses, whether it's Spurs or Atlanta or whomever, right? Again, I personally like this trade for both sides. I think this makes a lot of sense for both sides, but do you like it? Do not? Again, this is kind of just like a rumor trade, but this is something that I could see happening. I think it's a realistic trade, but again, love to hear your thoughts, opinions, however you feel, down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.